The bitter winter of 1944 found German tank crews on the Western Front in a state of grim confidence despite their strategic situation. Though the war was clearly turning against the Third Reich on all fronts, Panzer crews maintained one critical advantage that had proven decisive in countless small unit actions: superior armor. The American M4 Sherman tank, which they had faced since the Normandy landings, was predictable and vulnerable. German tankers had developed a darkly dismissive nickname for these machines: Tommy Cookers, or Ronsons, referring to the Sherman's tendency to burst into flames when hit. The slogan for Ronson lighters at the time was chillingly appropriate: lights, first time, every time. From the commanding height of a Panther or Tiger tank, German crews could engage Shermans well beyond the effective range of American return fire. The 75mm gun on standard Shermans struggled to penetrate German armor from the front, while German 75mm and 88mm guns could punch through Sherman armor at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. This technical disparity created a psychological edge that experienced German crews exploited ruthlessly. A common German tactic was to position heavy tanks hull down on ridgelines, exposing only their turrets while commanding open fields of fire, a scenario that repeatedly proved fatal for Sherman crews. American tankers were painfully aware of this disparity. Technical Sergeant Willis Fowler of the 3rd Armored Division described the psychological impact in a letter home. "We call them Ronson burners because they light up first time, every time when hit. The Krauts can punch through our front plate from 1,000 yards, while we need to flank them and hit them from the side at close range to have any chance. Our tactics aren't tactics at all. They're prayers that we can get close enough without being seen." The American military leadership had recognized this problem long before D-Day. In 1942, work had begun on a new heavy tank, initially designated T-26. Unlike the M4 Sherman, designed for infantry support and exploitation, the T-26 was conceived as a proper tank killer with heavier armor and a high-velocity 90mm gun capable of defeating German armor at combat ranges. The design prioritized protection and firepower over the Sherman's speed and mechanical reliability, a necessary evolution in response to the lethal realities of tank warfare on the European battlefield. However, the development and deployment of this new tank became mired in bureaucratic battles and doctrinal disagreements that would cost American lives. General Leslie McNair, commanding Army Ground Forces, strongly opposed the introduction of heavy tanks, believing that tank versus tank combat should be handled by specialized tank destroyers rather than tanks themselves. This doctrinal position, combined with concerns about disrupting the efficient Sherman production lines and complicating logistics, repeatedly delayed the T-26 program despite urgent requests from frontline commanders. The situation reached a crisis point during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. The massive German counteroffensive in the Ardennes featured heavy concentrations of Panthers and Tigers that brutally exposed the Sherman's inadequacies. In several engagements, American tankers found themselves virtually helpless against frontal armor they couldn't penetrate. Lieutenant Colonel Wilson M. Hawkins of the 2nd Armored Division reported, "We were losing 5 Shermans for every Panther destroyed. Our only hope was to overwhelm them with numbers or catch them from the flank, and in this terrain, flanking maneuvers were often impossible." Following the Ardennes offensive, the urgent need for better armored, more heavily gunned tanks could no longer be ignored. In January 1945, the first 20 M26 Pershing tanks, as the T-26 had been renamed, arrived in the European theater. These machines represented a revolutionary improvement over the Sherman. Weighing 46 tons compared to the Sherman's 33, the Pershing featured substantially thicker armor, up to 4 inches on the front glacis compared to the Sherman's 2.5 inches. Most critically, it mounted a high-velocity 90mm gun capable of penetrating a Panther's frontal armor at normal combat ranges. The first Pershings were assigned to the 3rd and 9th Armored Divisions but were initially used cautiously. Military leadership remained concerned about introducing a new, mechanically unproven tank during the critical final push into Germany. The crews assigned to these first Pershings received hasty training, often having to learn the new tank's systems while preparing for combat operations. Sergeant Albin Kowalewski, one of the first Pershing commanders, recalled, "We were still finding our way around the inside of these beasts when they told us we'd be heading to the front in 3 days. The training amounted to, here's how you start it, here's how you load it, try not to get killed while you figure out the rest." Despite these challenges, The Pershing's combat debut proved dramatic. On the 25th of February 1945, near the town of Elsdorf, Germany, a Pershing commanded by Sergeant Robert Early engaged and destroyed a Panther tank at a range of over 1,000 yards. The Panther, positioned on a distant ridgeline in what would normally have been a dominant firing position against Sherman's, was struck by a 90mm shell that penetrated its frontal armor, a shot that would have been impossible for a standard Sherman. German radio traffic intercepted after the engagement revealed confusion and alarm. The American tank had been initially identified as a Sherman based on its silhouette, and its ability to penetrate Panther armor from the front at extended range contradicted German tactical expectations. But it was an engagement in the ancient German city of Cologne that would indelibly establish the Pershing's reputation. On the 6th of March 1945, a Pershing commanded by Sergeant Nicholas Mashlonik lay in wait near the city's famous cathedral. When a German Panther emerged from a side street approximately 700 meters away, what followed was captured on film by combat cameraman Jim Bates in one of the most famous tank duels ever recorded. The Panther, unaware of the Pershing's presence, was tracked as it moved through the cathedral square. Mashlonik gave the order to fire, and the Pershing's 90mm gun sent a high-velocity armor-piercing shell directly into the Panther's thinner side armor. The German tank erupted in flames, its ammunition cooking off in a catastrophic explosion that killed the entire crew except for the driver, who escaped with severe burns. The entire engagement lasted less than 30 seconds. The film of this engagement was rapidly circulated among American units, providing a tremendous morale boost to Sherman crews who had endured months of tactical disadvantage. More significantly, captured German documents indicated the psychological impact on German tank forces was profound. A report from the 8th Panzer Division dated the 15th of March 1945 warned, "New American heavy tank encountered in Cologne area. Preliminary assessment indicates frontal armor resistant to our 75mm at normal combat ranges. 88mm effectiveness also reduced. Frontal engagement should be avoided where possible." German intelligence initially struggled to accurately assess the new threat. Some reports incorrectly identified the Pershing as a modified heavy Sherman variant, while others speculated it might be an entirely new design based on captured German technology. A Wehrmacht technical bulletin distributed in mid-March 1945 attempted to provide guidance. The new American heavy tank, designated Pershing by prisoner interrogation, presents a significantly enhanced threat compared to the Sherman. Frontal armor appears equivalent to our Panther. Main armament is a high-velocity 90mm capable of penetrating Panther frontal armor at ranges exceeding 800 meters. What German analysts found particularly troubling was the Pershing's combination of protection and mobility. While heavier than the Sherman, the Pershing maintained reasonable operational mobility thanks to its Ford GAF V8 engine and torsion bar suspension. Unlike the German Tiger II, which suffered chronic mechanical reliability issues and consumed enormous quantities of increasingly scarce fuel, the Pershing could keep pace with mechanized operations while providing protection, approaching heavy tank levels. This combination directly contradicted German design philosophy, which had generally accepted reduced mobility as the price for enhanced protection. A technical comparison conducted by German engineers, based on a captured Pershing, which had become bogged down, crossing the Rhine, and was abandoned by its crew, revealed several disquieting conclusions. The Pershing's frontal armor, while not as thick as a Tiger II's, was better angled to increase effective protection. Its 90mm gun, while not matching the penetrating power of the 88mm KUK-43 found on the Tiger II, was substantially more powerful than the 75mm on the Sherman, and roughly equivalent to the Panther's 75mm KUK-42. Most concerning from the German perspective was the Pershing's reliability. Even with limited operational experience, it was demonstrating mechanical robustness far superior to comparable German heavy tanks. As more Pershings arrived at the front through March and April 1945, German tactical responses evolved rapidly. Panzer units received orders to avoid frontal engagements with identified Pershing tanks and to employ ambush tactics, emphasizing concealment and first-shot advantage. A directive from Panzer Group West, dated the 2nd of April 1945, instructed, when American heavy tanks are identified in the enemy order of battle, prioritize flank security and prepare alternative positions to avoid frontal engagement. Employ smoke for disengagement if identified by enemy heavy tanks. This represented a dramatic reversal from previous tactics, which had emphasized aggressive frontal engagement against Sherman-equipped units. The psychological impact on German tank crews proved equally significant. Günther Steinweg, a Panther commander who survived the war, later recalled, "We had become accustomed to a certain technical superiority that allowed us to engage American tanks with confidence despite our numerical disadvantage. The appearance of this new heavy tank changed the psychological equation completely. Suddenly we were vulnerable from the front at normal combat ranges, a situation American tankers had endured for months, but which was entirely new and deeply unsettling for us. This psychological advantage manifested in changed tactical behaviors. German tank units became noticeably more cautious when intelligence suggested Pershings might be present, often withdrawing from positions they would have previously defended against Sherman-equipped units. While difficult to quantify, this hesitation undoubtedly saved American lives and accelerated the Allied advance. Colonel Harold Cohen of V Corps G2 Intelligence noted in an April 1945 assessment, "The introduction of the Pershing has created a disproportionate psychological impact relative to their actual numbers. German armored units are showing increased reluctance to engage when Pershings are identified, even withdrawing from positions they would likely have held against our standard tank battalions." Despite these successes, the Pershing's impact on the European campaign remained limited by its late introduction and small numbers. By the war's end, only 200 M26s had reached Europe compared to nearly 50,000 Shermans. They equipped only a few tank battalions, meaning most American armored units continued fighting with the familiar but vulnerable Sherman. Major General Maurice Rose, commanding the 3rd Armored Division, commented shortly before his death in action, "The Pershing represents what our tankers needed 2 years ago. Its limited numbers mean we're still predominantly fighting with equipment we know is technically inferior to what we're facing." The true value of the Pershing lay not just in its direct combat impact but in what it represented: America's industrial capacity to identify battlefield problems and produce solutions, even if bureaucratic obstacles delayed their implementation. German forces, increasingly aware that their technical advantages were being neutralized while their strategic position deteriorated, found the Pershing's appearance particularly demoralizing. As one captured German officer told his interrogators, "We expected America to eventually overcome our technical advantage through production capacity, but the speed with which you developed and deployed a qualitatively superior tank was genuinely shocking." In the final analysis, the Pershing arrived too late and in numbers too small to decisively influence the European campaign. Yet its psychological impact exceeded its statistical battlefield presence. For American tankers, it represented validation of their repeated requests for better equipment and a belated acknowledgement of the sacrifices made by Sherman crews fighting at a technical disadvantage. For German panzer forces, it represented the collapse of their final tactical advantage and confirmation that their strategic position was hopeless. The war would be over within 2 months of the Pershing's combat debut. The story of the Pershing illustrates a fundamental aspect of industrial warfare often overlooked in broader strategic analyses: the psychological impact of technological advantage or disadvantage on frontline troops. For years, German tank crews had operated with the confidence that their superior machines could dominate American armor in direct engagement. This confidence influenced tactical decisions, often leading to aggressive actions that would have been avoided without this technical edge. When the Pershing suddenly neutralized this advantage, the psychological impact rippled through German armored forces far beyond the actual number of engagements involving the new tank. A Panther commander captured after an engagement with Pershings near Remagen provided perhaps the most telling testimony to this effect. "We had been told throughout the war that American industry could produce quantity but not quality, that our technical superiority would always give us a fighting chance despite the material odds. The appearance of a tank that was both qualitatively competitive and being produced in numbers shattered this narrative completely. It confirmed what many of us had begun to suspect, that we were not just losing the war but had already lost it." Today, military historians debate whether earlier deployment of the Pershing might have significantly altered the European campaign's timeline or reduced American casualties. What remains beyond dispute is the dramatic psychological impact of those first engagements when German tank crews discovered, often fatally, that what they had initially identified as a familiar Sherman was in fact something altogether different. a moment of realization captured perfectly in the gun camera footage from Cologne as a Panther, confidently engaging what its crew likely believed was a vulnerable Sherman, met a sudden and unexpected end. The moment German tank crews discovered the Pershing was no ordinary Sherman represented more than just a tactical surprise. It signaled the end of the last significant technical advantage the Wehrmacht maintained on the Western Front. In the desperate final months of the Third Reich, this revelation carried a psychological weight far beyond its immediate tactical significance, confirming what many German soldiers had already begun to accept. That defeat was not just likely but inevitable, as even their last remaining advantages were being systematically eliminated by American industrial and technological might. The story of the Pershing extends beyond those initial shocking encounters to reveal a more complex battlefield reality. As more Pershings reached the front lines in March and April 1945, their impact became increasingly nuanced. While the dramatic engagement at Cologne Cathedral captured public attention, the day-to-day experiences of Pershing crews revealed both strengths and limitations of the new tank. Captain Richard Hosier, commanding a platoon of Pershings with the 9th Armored Division, documented his experiences in detailed after-action reports that provide a window into the tank's battlefield performance. "The 90mm gun exceeds all expectations," he wrote after an engagement near Remagen. "We engaged a Panther at 1,200 meters that was hull down behind a stone wall. The round went straight through both the wall and the Panther's frontal armor, something unimaginable with our old Shermans." The German crew was clearly shocked, abandoning their tank despite it still being operational. However, Hosier also documented challenges. The Pershing's weight and size created mobility issues in the damaged infrastructure of Germany's cities and towns. "We've had to bypass several objectives because bridges won't support our weight," he noted. "The Shermans can cross where we can't, creating tactical complications when operating in mixed units." Additionally, the Pershing's greater fuel consumption strained already stretched supply lines during the rapid advance into Germany. German responses to the Pershing threat evolved with experience. Initial shock gave way to systematic tactical adaptation. A captured Panzer Operations Order dated the 20th of March 1945 outlined new engagement protocols. American heavy tanks can be identified by their lower profile compared to Sherman's, larger gun mantlet, and distinctive road wheels. When identified, standard procedure is to withdraw if engaged frontally. Flanking positions should be sought where possible. If disengagement is impossible, prioritize targeting the gun sight, right side of turret, or track assemblies. These tactical directives reflected a fundamental shift in German armored doctrine. Since the Eastern Front campaigns of 1941–42, German tanks had emphasized the value of direct frontal engagement from hull-down positions, exploiting superior gun penetration and armor protection. The Pershing forced an uncomfortable reversion to mobility-focused tactics at precisely the moment when fuel shortages and deteriorating infrastructure made such maneuvers increasingly difficult. The psychological impact extended beyond combat encounters to maintenance and logistics personnel. German tank recovery teams, accustomed to salvaging damaged Panthers and Tigers for parts or repair, found Pershing victims offered little salvageable material. The catastrophic ammunition explosions that typically resulted from Pershing penetrations left little beyond charred hulks. A German ordnance officer's report captured in late March lamented, "The new American heavy tank's ammunition appears significantly more powerful than previous types. Vehicles struck by its projectiles typically suffer complete destruction rather than repairable damage, creating severe equipment shortages as fewer damaged vehicles can be returned to service." For American maintenance crews, the Pershing presented different challenges. Its more complex systems required specialized training that was often unavailable in forward areas. Technical Sergeant William Hayes, a maintenance officer with the 3rd Armored Division, recorded, "These machines are magnificent when they run, but when something breaks, we're often guessing at solutions. The hydraulic turret traverse system is particularly troublesome, and replacement parts are non-existent. We've resorted to cannibalizing damaged Pershings to keep others running." This maintenance challenge meant operational readiness rates for Pershing units typically ran 15–20% below those of Sherman-equipped units. The distribution of the limited number of Pershings created strategic dilemmas for American commanders. Some advocated concentrating them into specialized heavy tank battalions that could be deployed as breakthrough forces against German strongpoints. Others argued for distributing them among existing units to provide each with some heavy tank capability. In practice, a hybrid approach emerged, with most Pershings assigned to specific companies within standard tank battalions, creating what were effectively heavy tank companies within otherwise Sherman-equipped formations. This distribution pattern created distinctive engagement dynamics. German defenders quickly learned to identify which American tanks in an advancing formation were Pershings and prioritize avoiding or eliminating them. Lieutenant Karl Braumann, a Panther commander captured near Frankfurt, explained during interrogation, "We were instructed to identify the Pershings in any American formation and either withdraw from their sector or concentrate fire to eliminate them first. Once they were destroyed or driven off, the remaining Shermans could be engaged normally." This prioritization meant Pershing crews often faced concentrated German anti-tank fire, partially offsetting their technical advantages. The famous Thunderbolt 7 incident illustrated this targeting phenomenon. On the 18th of March 1945, a Pershing commanded by Lieutenant John Whitehill was advancing near Oberhausen when it was ambushed by multiple concealed anti-tank guns. German gunners ignored nearby Shermans to concentrate fire on the Pershing, scoring several hits that failed to penetrate but damaged the track assembly. The immobilized tank continued fighting until a flanking shot penetrated the thinner side armor, igniting ammunition. Whitehill and 2 crew members escaped, but 2 others perished. Captured German gunners later confirmed they had specific orders to prioritize the Pershing over other targets. Despite such setbacks, the Pershing's impact on German morale continued deepening as the war's final weeks approached. A psychological warfare assessment by SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, dated the 5th of April 1945, noted, "Prisoner interrogations consistently reveal that the appearance of American heavy tanks has contributed significantly to declining German combat motivation. Multiple prisoners have cited the Pershing specifically as evidence that continuing resistance is futile, as even Germany's technical advantages have been neutralized." This assessment was corroborated by German documents. A report from the German 116th Panzer Division to Army Group B headquarters, captured when the latter was overrun in mid-April, stated, "Combat effectiveness is severely degraded by awareness that American forces now possess armor superior to our Panthers in many engagement scenarios. Crew morale, previously sustained by confidence in technical superiority despite numerical disadvantage, has deteriorated substantially. Desertion rates among tank crews have increased 150% since February." The Pershing story intersected dramatically with another late-war American innovation, the T-31 demolition tank, a specialized Sherman variant carrying a 105 mm demolition gun. On the 31st of March 1945, near Paderborn, elements of the 3rd Armored Division encountered battle group remnants of the 9th Panzer Division, equipped with several Tiger II heavy tanks. A Pershing, commanded by Lieutenant Thurman Coleman, engaged one Tiger II but found its 90 mm shells unable to penetrate the massive frontal armor at the engagement range of 900 meters. After taking 2 non-penetrating hits, the Tiger was suddenly struck by a 105 mm shell from a nearby T-31, breaking its track. The immobilized Tiger was then flanked and destroyed by Coleman's Pershing. This engagement illustrated both the Pershing's limitations and the evolving American combined arms approach. While not capable of frontally defeating the heaviest German armor at all ranges, the Pershing could operate effectively within a tactical system where different specialized vehicles supported each other. German after-action reports increasingly lamented this American tactical flexibility, noting that their own specialized vehicles often operated in isolation due to fuel shortages and communication breakdowns. For American tankers transitioning from Shermans to Pershings, the psychological impact proved equally significant. Staff Sergeant Charles Riley, who commanded both tanks during the campaign, wrote home, "The difference isn't just technical, it's how you feel inside. In the Sherman, we felt hunted. Every ridgeline might hide a Panther that could kill us before we could even spot it. In the Pershing, we're the hunters. We can take the fight to them on equal terms." The confidence this creates is hard to explain to anyone who hasn't lived both experiences. This confidence manifested in aggressive tactics that would have been suicidal in Shermans. Lieutenant Colonel Burton Boudinot, commanding a tank battalion in the 9th Armored Division, observed, Units equipped with Pershings are consistently more willing to advance against reported enemy armor without artillery preparation or infantry screening. While this occasionally results in losses from concealed anti-tank guns, the overall advance rate for Pershing-equipped units exceeds standard battalions by approximately 30% in contested areas. As the war entered its final month, the Pershing's impact extended beyond tactical engagements to influence strategic German decision-making. Intercepted communications revealed that knowledge of American heavy tank deployments influenced Wehrmacht withdrawal planning. A directive from OKW, German High Command, dated the 10th of April 1945, instructed, "Areas where American heavy tank formations have been identified should be prioritized for immediate withdrawal to secondary defensive lines." Conventional anti-tank defenses have proven inadequate against these vehicles, requiring concentration of our diminishing heavy armor resources for effective resistance. The Pershing's design incorporated lessons from 3 years of tank warfare that manifested in details German crews found disconcerting. The commander's vision cupola, with its 360-degree visibility, eliminated the blind spots that Sherman commanders had learned to live with and German tankers had learned to exploit. The hydraulic turret traverse system allowed the gun to track moving targets with a speed German gunners found difficult to match with their manual systems. The gyro-stabilized gun made firing on the move substantially more effective than comparable German systems. Major Hans-Dieter Wilhelmi, a Panzer Regiment commander captured in the Ruhr pocket, provided particularly insightful analysis during his interrogation. What makes the Pershing especially dangerous is not just its armor or gun, but how these elements are integrated. The stabilization system allows effective fire while moving, the power traverse tracks targets faster than our gunners can respond, and the optical quality of the sights exceeds our late-war production. These factors combine to create a system more effective than the sum of its specifications would suggest. The final significant Pershing engagement occurred on the 21st of April 1945, near Dessau. As American forces approached the Elbe River, a Pershing platoon encountered 3 Jag-Panthers, heavily armored tank destroyers based on the Panther chassis, defending a critical bridge. In the resulting engagement, 2 Pershings were damaged by long-range fire, but a third, commanded by Sergeant William McVeigh, successfully flanked the German position by fording a shallow section of the river. From this position, McVeigh's tank destroyed all 3 Jag-Panthers, with side shots at ranges under 300 meters. German prisoners later revealed they had been ordered to hold the position at all costs, but had received no warning about American heavy tanks operating in the sector. As Germany approached final collapse, captured documents revealed a desperate final adaptation to the Pershing threat. With conventional anti-tank weapons proving inadequate, German forces increasingly relied on concealed infantry teams with Panzerfaust rocket launchers, a weapon originally designed for urban combat rather than open battlefield engagements. A tactical directive dated the 25th of April 1945 instructed, "When American heavy tanks are encountered without adequate infantry support, priority should be given to close approach tactics using terrain concealment. Panzerfaust teams should target the rear engine compartment or turret ring, avoiding frontal engagements even at close range." This desperate tactical shift represented the final evolution of German responses to the Pershing, from confident frontal engagement of American armor to terrified avoidance and ambush tactics. For German tank crews who had begun the war with overwhelming qualitative superiority in Poland and France, this final phase represented a bitter culmination. As one captured Panzer officer observed, "We began this war with tanks the enemy couldn't hope to match. We end it hiding from American tanks we can't hope to engage on equal terms," a reversal that tells the entire story of this conflict. In the war's final days, as organized German resistance collapsed across the remaining unoccupied territory, the Pershing's psychological impact continued resonating. German unit surrenders increasingly occurred when Pershing-equipped formations were identified in their sector. A report from the U.S. First Army dated the 2nd of May, 1945 noted, "Multiple battalion-size surrenders have specifically referenced the presence of American heavy tanks as a factor in the decision to capitulate rather than resist. The Pershing has acquired a reputation among German forces disproportionate to its actual deployment numbers. The war in Europe ended before the full potential impact of widespread Pershing deployment could be realized. Production had accelerated through early 1945, with over 1,400 M26S manufactured by the war's end. However, the European theater received only the initial few hundred, with the remainder intended for the planned invasion of Japan or retained in the United States. This limited deployment meant the Pershing story remained one of outsized psychological impact rather than statistical battlefield dominance. The final assessment of the Pershing's combat performance came from an unlikely source, captured German tank General Heinrich Freiherr von Luttwitz. During extensive post-war technical debriefing, he observed, "The appearance of the Pershing confirmed what many of us had long suspected, that American industrial capacity would eventually overcome any qualitative advantage we could maintain. Had this tank appeared even 6 months earlier in substantial numbers, our armored forces would have been rendered completely ineffective much sooner. Its limited deployment was perhaps the only stroke of luck we experienced in the war's final phase." In the final analysis, the story of the M26 Pershing represents far more than a mere technical evolution in tank design. It embodied the culmination of harsh lessons learned through years of combat disadvantage, lessons written in the blood of thousands of American tankers who faced superior German armor in inadequate vehicles. The Pershing's belated arrival on the battlefield served as both validation and tragedy, proof that American industry could produce world-class armor, but a reminder of how bureaucratic resistance and doctrinal rigidity had delayed its deployment until the war's final months. For the German tank crews who first encountered this unexpected adversary, the psychological impact proved far greater than the Pershing's limited numbers might suggest. After years of technical superiority that had allowed them to engage American armor with confidence despite overwhelming numerical disadvantage, they suddenly faced an enemy that could match or exceed their capabilities. This revelation came at precisely the moment when other strategic advantages had already disappeared, when fuel was scarce, experienced crews were dwindling, and the strategic situation was hopeless. The Pershing thus became not merely another enemy weapon but a symbol of Germany's collapsing technical advantage and imminent defeat. The American tankers who transitioned from Shermans to Pershings experienced an equally profound psychological transformation. After years of operating with the knowledge that their vehicles were outclassed, advancing with the grim calculus that multiple Shermans would be sacrificed to overcome each Panther or Tiger, they suddenly possessed machines that could engage on equal or superior terms. This shift from hunted to hunter, from disadvantage to advantage, transformed not just tactics but morale in ways that statistical analysis cannot fully capture. Today, military historians continue debating whether earlier deployment of the Pershing might have significantly altered the European campaign. What remains beyond dispute is the dramatic moment of realization captured in places like Cologne. That instant when German tank crews discovered what appeared to be a familiar Sherman was actually something altogether different. In that moment of recognition, often their last, they experienced in microcosm what their nation was experiencing strategically, the collapse of the final advantage they had believed might stave off inevitable defeat. The Pershing's legacy extends beyond World War II into the Cold War and beyond. Its direct descendant, the M46 Patton, would soon face Soviet-built T-34 seconds in Korea. Its design philosophy, balancing firepower, protection, and mobility, would influence American tank development for decades. But perhaps its most enduring legacy lies in how it changed the psychological equation of armored warfare on the Western Front during those final, desperate months of the Third Reich. The moment when German tank crews discovered the Pershing was no ordinary Sherman, and with that discovery, lost their last remaining vestige of battlefield confidence. The end.